And I heard this week that President Trump said I had...
Republicans' deep divisions over the 2020 U.S. election were laid bare as the party censured two lawmakers investigating the deadly Capitol assault aimed at stopping its certification, only to see Donald Trump rebuked by Mike Pence for claiming falsely that his former vice president could have overturned the results. The first gold medals of the Beijing Winter Olympics are up for grabs, with host China hoping that the sport will roar to the fore after a troubled build-up dominated by COVID and rights concerns. And Moroccan rescuers are in the nerve-wracking final stages of a marathon effort to rescue Ryan, a 5-year-old boy trapped down a well for a fourth night. And the state of Texas is still experiencing heavy snow as the rest of the country has been hit by a giant winter storm, dumping a foot of snow across the Northeast and New England. First in our news, former U.S. Vice President Mike Pence said that he had no right to overturn the 2020 election, and former President Donald Trump was wrong to claim he could have done so. Speaking in Florida, Pence dismissed Trump's assertion he could have blocked Democrat Joe Biden's victory when he presided over a January 6, 2021 clarification by Congress of the presidential elections. Let's listen in.
And I heard this week that President Trump said I had the right to overturn the election. But President Trump is wrong. I had no right to overturn the election. The presidency belongs to the American people and the American people alone. And frankly, there is no idea more un-American than the notion that any one person could choose the American president. Under the Constitution, I had no right to change the outcome of our election. And Kamala Harris will have no right to overturn the election when we beat them in 2024.
The former vice president's comments were his most forceful to date. Pence, a staunch loyalist when Trump was in office, also called the January 6th assault on Congress a dark day in the history of the U.S. Capitol. Again, let's listen in.
January 6th was a dark day in the history of the United States Capitol. Lives were lost, and many were injured. But thanks to the courageous action of the Capitol Police and federal law enforcement, the violence was quelled, the Capitol was secured, and we reconvened the Congress that very same day to finish our work under the Constitution of the United States.
Now, both Pence and Trump are potential presidential candidates in the 2024 election, and their public disagreements are seen as early maneuvering in the race to become the Republican Party nominee. In other news, China's UN ambassador on Friday called on the U.S. to be more flexible in its dealings with North Korea. But Beijing joined others to scrap a U.S.-drafted Security Council joint statement, also condemning Pyongyang's missile launches. Again, let's listen in.
The DPRK's January 30th launch of an intermediate-range ballistic missile is a significant escalation in the DPRK's recent violations of multiple Security Council resolutions and seeks to further destabilize the region. We call on all Council members to speak with one voice in condemning these dangerous and unlawful acts.
Whether the Security Council should issue something or not should depend on whether it's helpful. We should understand the DPRK's launch is not an isolated incident. The solution lies in dialogue. U.S. is a direct party to the Korean Peninsula issue. If they do want to see some new breakthrough, they should show more sincerity and flexibility. We have all seen what happened in Singapore. We have all seen what happened in Hanoi. And we have seen the suspension of the nuclear test. We have seen the suspension of the launch of intercontinental ballistic missiles. And then what have been done by the US? So that's a question I think you should ask our US colleagues.
Kim Jong-un's regime conducted an unprecedented 7-weapons test in January, including launching its most powerful missile since 2017, as it hinted it could restart long-range and nuclear testing. Washington had proposed a statement decrying those launches, but China and Russia, along with other nations, refused to sign on it. Friday's meeting on North Korea was the third in the space of a month. In the last one on January 20, 8 council members, Albania, Brazil, Britain, France, Ireland, Norway, the United Arab Emirates, and the U.S., along with Japan, released a joint statement condemning the North's test. The other 7 council members, China, Gabon, Ghana, India, Kenya, Mexico, and Russia, refused to sign on. In other news, the Kremlin said that Washington could not be trusted after U.S. officials claimed to have evidence of a planned operation by Moscow to film a fake Ukrainian attack on Russians. The Pentagon said Thursday it had evidence of a plan by Moscow to film a fake Ukrainian attack on Russians to justify an assault on its pro-West neighbor. Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin and Chinese President Xi Jinping met in Beijing ahead of the opening ceremony of the Winter Olympic Games. As both their countries face increasing criticism from Washington, the two leaders criticized what they said was negative U.S. influence both in Europe and the Asia-Pacific region. A document agreed by Russia and China and released by the Kremlin said they opposed the further expansion of NATO and called on the U.S.-led defense bloc to abandon Cold War-era approaches. Talks between the Russian and Chinese leaders come as Moscow is in a diplomatic standoff with the U.S. over Ukraine, demanding that NATO curb its eastwards expansion. Russia said it wants NATO to guarantee that it will not admit new members, especially Ukraine, and that Washington will not establish new military bases in ex-Soviet countries. In the document, Moscow and Beijing also criticized Washington's negative impact on peace and stability in the Asia-Pacific region. It said they were seriously concerned by the AUKUS defense alliance, including Australia, Britain, and the U.S., especially their cooperation on nuclear submarines. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken travels to Australia next week for a Quad Group ministerial meeting, also involving his counterparts from India and Japan to discuss maritime security and cooperation against COVID, according to the State Department. President Joe Biden's top diplomat also heads to Fiji in the first visit by a U.S. Secretary of State to the island nation since 1985 to discuss what the department called, quote, ways to advance a free and open Indo-Pacific, using the administration term for the Asia-Pacific region. China wasn't mentioned in the statement announcing Blinken's trip, but the Quad grouping is focused on countering a rising Beijing. Biden held an in-person summit at the White House last September with the leaders of Australia, India, and Japan as they highlighted the Quad's role in safeguarding a stable, democratic Asia-Pacific. In other news, President Xi Jinping declared the Beijing Winter Olympics open as China tried to turn the page on a buildup overshadowed by human rights concerns, COVID, and a U.S.-led diplomatic boycott. Take a look. The Beijing Winter Olympics, under strict COVID protocols, have officially began. International tensions over China's human rights records are overshadowing the Games. The U.S., Canada, Britain, and Australia are staging a diplomatic boycott over China's treatment of the Muslim Uyghur minority in Xinjiang. The country's athletes will still compete in the Games, but no government officials will attend. World Health Organization head Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus and UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres are among the leaders of global institutions at the ceremony. Russian President Vladimir Putin also attended the event. The ceremony is the mastermind of acclaimed Chinese film director Zhang Yimou, who was behind the 2008 extravaganza. In other news, U.S. soldiers arrived in Poland today as part of NATO moves to send in extra troops over fears that Russia could invade Ukraine. According to a Polish army spokesman, Major Remslaw Lipczynski said the soldiers who arrived Saturday were from the 82nd Division. Washington said last week it would send about 3,000 additional troops to Eastern Europe to defend NATO members against any aggression. Washington is sending 2,000 troops stationed in the U.S., and they are being flown to Germany and Poland. Another 1,000 troops already in Germany are being sent to Romania. Western capitals have accused Russia of amassing some 100,000 troops on the borders of pro-Western Ukraine in preparation for an invasion. And Russia denies this is an invasion, that an invasion is imminent, and accuses the U.S. and NATO of ramping up tensions after the U.S.-led military bloc said it was bolstering Europe's eastern defenses. The U.S. state of Texas is still experiencing heavy snow as the rest of the country has been hit by a giant winter storm, dumping a foot of snow across the Northeast and New England. And in New York, here's the governor. Let's listen in.
Yes, well, this storm is throwing everything at us. We have snow, we have freezing rain, we have sleet, we have icy roads, and so we're looking at this combination here in the Hudson Valley in Ulster County. Our biggest concern right now is ice on the roads.
Now, storm left grounded planes and around 3,400 flights canceled. There were also reported power outages across a 2,000-mile stretch of the country. Governor Hochul said they have around 38,000 power outages, mostly in Hudson Valley. Meanwhile, 5 people died and another was injured Friday when an avalanche struck Austria's Tyrol province, according to rescue services. The victims were buried under snow in an area near the Swiss border, according to a rescue official. No details were given on the identity or nationality of those killed in the avalanche. The weather services have urged caution after the numerous snowfalls this week. More than 50 avalanches were recorded in the Tyrol region over 48 hours. In recent years, an average of around 20 people have been killed annually by avalanches in Austria. And just a week after Tropical Storm Anna left a trail of destruction through Madagascar, the UN warned that an incoming cyclone could impact nearly 600,000 people. According to WMO, tropical cyclone experts describe Batsirai as very dangerous, especially if strengthening into an intense tropical cyclone, threatening lives and livelihoods in Madagascar. Again, let's listen in.
Madagascar is bracing for a much more powerful cyclone called Batsirai. It's currently the equivalent of a Category 3 storm, and the WMO Regional Centre, which is based in La Réunion, is operated by Météo France. They are forecasting that there is the potential for it to strengthen further ahead of landfall into a Category 4 equivalent storm. So that means winds of about 200 kilometers an hour.
We anticipate a significant humanitarian impact in Madagascar, including in areas that are still recovering from Tropical Storm Anna in late January. Our efforts under the government of Madagascar's leadership include preparing for the pre-deployment of search and rescue capacity and response teams to areas likely to be impacted, aircrafts being placed on standby to support rapid assessment and response.
The authorities, ourselves, we are helping for this cyclone, and we have this one coming tomorrow. It's expected in the morning, which is expected to impact more than 600,000 people with 150,000 displaced. So it's a major crisis. With as we can see, if it really becomes more stronger than it is now, it can be even worse. So we are all very nervous.
We are in the tropical cyclone season in the Indian Ocean, so we are going to see cyclones. We are going to see rainfall. Madagascar, it has been a drier, wet season, than normal so far. It's not uniform across the whole of Madagascar, and it's really southern Madagascar where, there really is the bad drought that we've all been reading about and seeing. So, and at this stage, it's not completely clear, if the rainfall from this cyclone is going to hit the whole of the drought-affected area.
Now, the eye of the storm was forecast to cross the center of the island overnight into Sunday before leaving its western shores by Monday. Meteo France said winds could reach more than 200 or even 250 kilometers per hour at the point of impact, and waves could reach as high as 50 feet. Extreme weather events like cyclones have become more frequent and intense in southern Africa, driving hunger and eroding development, causing devastation, sometimes in a matter of hours, according to the World Food Program. Meanwhile, a new study has shown that ice on a glacier near the summit of Mount Everest that took millennia to form has shrunk dramatically in the last 3 decades due to climate change. The South Col Formation may have already lost around 55 meters or 180 feet of thickness in the last 25 years, according to research led by the University of Maine and published this week by Nature. Carbon dating showed the top layer of ice was around 2,000 years old, suggesting that the glacier was thinning more than 80 times faster than the time it took to form, according to the study. And at that rate, South Col was probably going to disappear within very few decades, according to lead scientist Paul Majewski, telling this to National Geographic. The South Col Glacier is around 7,900 meters or 26,000 feet above sea level and a kilometer below the peak of the world's highest mountain. Other researchers have shown that Himalayan glaciers are also melting at an accelerating rate. As the glaciers shrink, hundreds of lakes have formed in the foothills of Himalayan mountains that could burst and unleash floods. And take a look. A video from the Sea Shepherd NGO shows tens of thousands of dead fish floating on the surface of the Atlantic Ocean, 300 kilometers from the French city of La Rochelle in the Bay of Biscay, allegedly discarded by the Margiris, one of the largest fishing vessels in the world. According to a BBC report, quote, Fisheries Minister Annick Girardin tweeted in French that she was investigating and that the images were shocking. An administrative investigation has indeed been opened. And in other news, imagery from a NASA and European Space Agency observatory spacecraft show a coronal mass ejection, or CME, a large explosion of plasma and magnetic field from the outer edge of the sun's atmosphere following a solar flare on January 29. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration issued a moderate geomagnetic storm watch. The storm causes colorful nighttime auroras. NASA says solar flares are a sudden explosion of energy caused by tangling, crossing, or reorganizing of magnetic field lines near sunspots. It also said solar activity can have effects here on Earth, so scientists are closely monitoring solar activity every day. Meanwhile, NASA honored the members of the NASA family who lost their lives while furthering the cause of exploration and discovery. Here's Philip Toledo from our Atlanta, Georgia Bureau.
Space exploration may look easy in the movies, but the reality is that it's highly complex and dangerous. Those looking to go into space to further the cause of exploration and discovery put their lives on the line. And there have been some tragedies. On January 27th, NASA, or the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, honors those who lost their lives through this pursuit. This year's Day of Remembrance fell on the 55th anniversary of the Apollo 1 tragedy, where 3 astronaut pioneers lost their lives. Officials held an observance at Arlington National Cemetery in Virginia, including a traditional wreath laying at the tomb of the unknown soldier. Observances for the crews of Apollo 1 and Space Shuttles Challenger and Columbia followed. Due to the ongoing pandemic, many of the events were closed to the public and streamed online. NASA administrators also hosted a panel to discuss various safety topics and lessons learned from the tragedies, as each one triggered massive changes and improvements in the safety protocols, leading to the agency's core focus on safety today. NASA Administrator Bill Nelson was quoted saying, "NASA's Day of Remembrance is an opportunity to honor members of the NASA family who lost their lives in our shared endeavor to advance exploration and discovery for the good of all humanity. Every day we have the opportunity to further uplift the legacies of those who gave their lives in pursuit of discovery by taking the next giant leap, meeting every challenge head-on as they did. In doing so, we must also never forget the lessons learned from each tragedy and embrace our core value of safety." Philip Toledo, Learning Curve, Eagle News.
Thank you, Philip. And Eagle News, we'll be right back. Stay tuned.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
Alam namin ang iyong pagsisikap. Dama namin ang iyong mga sakripisyo. Kita namin ang pagharap mo sa bawat pagsubok. Kaya sa kabila ng mga hamon ng buhay, nandito kami para umalalay. Kasi katulad mo, gusto rin namin ang magandang bukas para sa kanya. Hatid namin ang dekalidad na edukasyon at makabagong pasilidad sa abot-kayang halaga. Kaya huwag ka nang mangamba. Sasamahan ka namin tuparin ang mga pangarap niya. Maaasahan mong sulit dito ang mga pinagsikapan mo. Sa aming mga makabagong pasilidad at sistema ng edukasyon. May lalabas natin ang aking talino at mga kakayahan niya. Kahit sa munting halaga, makakasiguro ka na makakasabay siya sa mabilis na pag-ikot ng mundo. Sa New Era, karamay mo kami sa bawat hamon. Kaagapay mo kami sa bawat hakbang. Kasama mo kami sa bawat ngiti at tagumpay.
Welcome back. Rescuers are racing against the clock because a 5-year-old boy named Brian fell down a 32-meter or 100-foot well on Tuesday. The child was sent on oxygen and water via pipes. The operation was made more complex by the mix of rocky and sandy soils and the risk of a landslide. The boy's mother told Moroccan media that Ryan had been playing nearby when he disappeared on Tuesday afternoon. The boy's fate has attracted crowds of people to the site of the operation, and parked cars line the roads around the village. The drama has sparked an outpouring of sympathy online, with the Arabic hashtag Save Ryan going viral across North Africa. Meanwhile, the parents of a young black man shot dead by police say that Minneapolis officers executed their son and gave him no chance of survival. Take a look at this video. Now, in this video, an officer uses a key to unlock the door, and then a group of officers enter while shouting police search warrant. Locke, who was on a couch, starts to rise from beneath a blanket with a gun in his hand when police fired. The total time between the officer's entrance and the shots fired was less than 10 seconds. Locke was pronounced dead at the hospital. The local Star Tribune newspaper reported that Locke was not named in the search warrant, but said he was related to a suspect in the investigation of a homicide. The family's attorney said in a statement Thursday that he legally possessed a firearm and had no past criminal record. His mother told the Star Tribune, "We want justice for our son." The family has retained lawyer Ben Crump, who has represented multiple black victims of police violence, including George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, whose killings in 2020 sparked nationwide protests. No-knock raids continue to take the lives of innocent black people, according to Crump. Locke said Locke had bought a gun because he was a delivery driver and wanted to be able to protect himself, according to the attorney. He also said African Americans, like any other American citizens, have a right to the Second Amendment, referring to the U.S. constitutional right to bear arms. In other news, 5 tourists and 2 crew died Friday when their plane crashed on a trip to view Peru's famous Nazca lines, according to the Transport Ministry. The Cessna 207 single-engine plane belonging to the Aero Santos tourism company came down shortly after takeoff from the small airport of Maria Reche in Nazca around noon. There were no survivors among the 7 on board. The Civil Defense Office in Nazca said the tourists were 2 Chileans and 3 people from the Netherlands. Dozens of planes operate from the Maria Reche airfield, flying tourists, mainly foreigners, over the Nazca lines, a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The Cessna crashed as it was beginning its aerial tour on the site, falling at the edge of the road, according to radio station RPP. The plane exploded on impact and burst into flames, leaving the bodies charred beyond recognition, according to Canal N, which published the video of the smoking remains of the aircraft. The cause of the crash is under investigation. The Russian embassy in Manila at the upscale Dasmariñas village in Makati City was hit by a fire on Friday night and sustained estimated damage of at least 100 million pesos. Take a look. No casualties were reported. The cause of the fire is still under investigation, according to the Russian Foreign Ministry. The fire reportedly started on the 2nd floor at 8:25 p.m. and it reached the second alarm. It was declared under control by 11:38 in the evening and out at 2:10 in the morning Saturday, according to reports from the Bureau of Fire Protection. In other news, the Department of Health today tallied 7,689 new SARS-CoV or severe acute respiratory syndrome infections, the fifth straight day below the 10,000 mark. The latest case bulletin showed a total of 136,436 are undergoing treatment for COVID-19, down from the 291,618 peak recorded on January 21st. The DOH also reported 22,539 new recoveries. One new fatality, on the other hand, brought to 54,214 the COVID-19 death toll. Staying in the country, clinical trials are ongoing on the possible use of oral pill molnupiravir as prophylaxis to prevent an exposed person from contracting COVID. Dr. Benjamin Ko, the clinical investigator of the Move Ahead clinical trial at the Asian Hospital and Medical Center, said the AHMC in Alabang, Muntinlupa and Quirino Memorial Medical Center in Project 4, Quezon City, have been conducting these studies since November last year. Let's take a look.
Na may COVID. Ang clinical trial po na ginagawa natin ngayon ay sa bagong indikasyon. Ang ibig sabihin nun ay when we say it has not been proven na pwede natin gamitin ito for post-exposure prophylaxis. At ito po ang tinitignan natin ngayon. Pwede ba itong magamit as post-exposure prophylaxis? Ang ibig sabihin po ng post-exposure prophylaxis ay kung kunyari ako, no, meron akong COVID at na-expose po kayo sa akin, ay maaari na ba kayong uminom ng molnupiravir para hindi kayo magkaroon ng infeksyon. Ang kasali po sa clinical trial ng post-exposure prophylaxis, 4 na bansa sa Asia ang kasama dito. So that's Japan, Malaysia, the Philippines, and Thailand po. Ito po yung mga may comorbidities. Ang importante lang po, no, yun lang ang hinahabol namin, yung mga na-expose doon sa may COVID. So, kunyari, meron kayo sa pamilya na may COVID at na-expose po kayo, kailangan po doon sa mga na-expose ay hindi pa po, 1, nababakunahan, 2, hindi pa po nagkakaroon ng COVID in the past. And 3, they should be more than 18 years old. So if they fulfill those criteria, they can contact us at 0968 558-3091 or 0927-007-6602. Tapos kami na pong bahalang mag-assess kung sa clinical trial na to.
The oral treatment called molnupiravir is taken within 5 days of symptom onset and was shown in a pre-Omicron trial of 1,400 participants to reduce COVID hospitalizations and deaths by 30% among at-risk people. 8 capsules of molnupiravir are taken orally for 5 days for a total of 40 capsules. The U.S. death toll from the coronavirus has reached 900,000. That according to a Johns Hopkins University coronavirus tracker. Take a look. The toll had hit 800,000 dead in mid-December, just a month and a half ago. New cases linked to the Omicron variant are falling, but daily deaths are still rising, with an average of 2,400 now, according to government figures. COVID deaths usually occur a few weeks after patients get the virus, which explains why the spike in deaths occurs later than the spike in new cases. Americans continue to die from COVID in large numbers because only 64% of the population is fully immunized, despite highly effective vaccines being widely available. In his statement, President Biden again urged Americans to get vaccinated. The U.S. has the most COVID deaths in absolute terms, ahead of Brazil and India, according to government figures. Meanwhile, India's official death toll from COVID-19 passed 500,000, although many experts believe the real figure is likely much higher. The daily update from the country's Federal Health Ministry showed the number of fatalities reaching 501,114. Total infections stood at 42,080,664, according to statistics second only to the U.S. Authorities in the Delhi area that includes the capital, on Friday announced high schools, colleges, restaurants, and gyms would be allowed open from next week. And it's official. From today, Austrians over the age of 18 must be vaccinated against COVID-19 or face the possibility of a heavy fine, an unprecedented measure in the European Union. The new measure, adopted on January 20 by Parliament, was signed into law by President Alexander Van der Bellen on Friday. Checks will begin from mid-March, with sanctions ranging from 600 to 3,600 euros. They will, however, be lifted if the person fined gets vaccinated within 2 weeks. And throughout the day, vans loaded with bags full of COVID PCR test kits arrived at the Vienna laboratory. It's the backbone of the city's Everybody Gargle initiative, which aims to make it easier for those in Vienna to test for the new coronavirus frequently and for free. Take a look.
Wir haben eine Testkapazität von 800.000 Tests pro Tag. Ja. Wir beschäftigen 1.600 Mitarbeiter auf ungefähr 10.000 Quadratmeter Laborfläche und wir machen ausschließlich Covid-Diagnostik. Das ist extrem niederschwellig, ja, und Sie brauchen kein medizinisches Fachpersonal, um einen Abstrich abzunehmen, sondern das Gurgeln ist so sicher, man kann damit so ganz geringe Virusmengen nachweisen, dass das mittlerweile wirklich Golden Standard und State of the Art ist.
Meanwhile, a protest against COVID-19 public health restrictions in the Canadian capital of Ottawa has gone on for days now. As Eagle News correspondent Andre Lajoie reports, organizers have indicated they are in no hurry to wrap it up. Take a look.
What started out as a protest at the seat of the Canadian government has become an occupation of the country capital city. A convoy of truck and other vehicles rolled into Ottawa last weekend, and they are remaining honking horns and disrupting everyday life in the city residents. There is no end in sight. As the weekend approaches, the demonstrators have set up 3 large tents for food and eating area. They are bringing in fuel for transport trucks that remain parked. Supplies and fuel are being brought in on off-road quads to get around police barricades. The majority protesters have left, but a core group of about 100 people remains on Parliament Hill, and another 200 are milling around the region. Organizers say more people will join them this weekend. Police are greatly outnumbered. Their role has been largely to de-escalate any violence. Only 3 arrests have been made so far. The downtown core has been virtually shut down since the weekend. A number of businesses closed their doors because protesters harassed their staff. For those living in the downtown area, life has become unbearable. Fireworks, loud music, and horns keep people awake all night. There are reports of vandalism as well. Protesters say this will continue until they get what they want, and to public health restriction. People walking on streets, taking videos and pictures, are having their face masks removed by protesters. Some of the reporters covering the protest disruptions were forced out of the area. All in all, Ottawa is a city under siege by people who claim to be fighting for freedom. I am Andre Lajoie, Eagle News International in Ottawa, Canada.
Thank you, Andre. Meanwhile, to Hong Kong now, where zero COVID policy was on the ropes Saturday, as authorities announced a record number of new infections, sending officials again scrambling to ramp up testing capacity and warning that a tightening of virus control measures could be needed. Today, the city recorded 351 confirmed cases, its highest daily figure since the pandemic began, with 161 cases being either untraceable or pending investigation. Health Chief Sophia Chan told or urged Hong Kongers to stay at home to slow the spread of the virus, though she said that the sewage analysis had revealed that the virus had already been found in much of the city. Health officials also said they would loosen rules that have seen thousands of close contacts of infected people detained in a government facility, suggesting they may be able to quarantine at home depending on their risk level. Now, this would free up hospital beds and take into account the fact that the Omicron variant, which makes up the majority of Hong Kong's new cases, causes milder symptoms, according to authorities. City leader Carrie Lam earlier said authorities could further tighten virus control measures next week. Hong Kong has recorded more than 15,000 confirmed cases with 213 deaths. To other news now, the Los Angeles Consul General is urging Filipinos to sign up and vote as the deadline of registration for the upcoming May 2022 national and local elections. Here's Eva Basalyahe for the report. Eva.
Position.
In the heavily populated Filipino-American community in LA, the Philippine Consulate General Los Angeles is reaching out to registered voters, encouraging them to cast their ballots for the upcoming Philippine presidential election.
We have actually the biggest Filipino diaspora, not just in the United States, but in the entire globe. Under our jurisdiction, we have 1.3 million Filipinos, and the majority of whom are, of course, in LA County. The upcoming presidential elections this year is very important. It is a pivotal moment in our history because, as you know, we just went through, or we're still going through, a global pandemic. The economy of the country has been affected severely. So the challenge really is for the next president to make sure that we recover swiftly, but also effectively, to bring back our country into its normal footing. The main challenge is to provide jobs, create jobs, more jobs to our people, and to make sure that we minimize, if not totally eliminate, these ill effects of the pandemic. The voting period, actually, for overseas voters starts a month earlier than in the Philippines. So overseas, the voting period, meaning the period during which they can actually cast their votes, starts on April 9 up to May 8. Meaning that the registered voters will send in their ballots to the Philippine consulates. The ballots will be coming from COMELEC. COMELEC will be sending these ballots to us, the consulate. We have here what we call the Special Ballot Reception and Custody Group. When we receive all those ballots, they will sort it out and send those ballots to the registered forwarding address of all the registered voters. You receive your ballot from us, not directly from the COMELEC, from us. You will now send it back to us, properly filled out, indicating the candidates that you choose for whatever position, for national position anyway, meaning presidential, senator, and party list representatives. So when we receive all those ballots from all the voters, from the more than 32,000, assuming all vote, then we will assemble them and canvass them on May 9, which is election day. Synchronized yan sa Pilipinas. After tallying all the votes here, we will bring the results to the Philippine Embassy in Washington, D.C., where the Washington will serve as the overall canvasser for votes in the United States. And then it's the embassy that will bring the tallied votes from the U.S. to the Philippines. This 2022, we have registered a total of 37,000. And if we are going by the historical trend, wherein you're only expecting about 15% turnout, then we would be expecting only about 5,000 votes coming from under our jurisdiction. I think that in terms of the actual casting of ballots, the pandemic should not be a problem because you are now just going to send it by mail. But then, even if that's the case, I think there needs to be a more intense campaigning, not just among us as government officials here, but also among the candidates themselves, to encourage voters to really cast their votes come election day, so that they will exercise the right of suffrage, which is constitutionally guaranteed, in terms of actually casting your vote? Did you actually register so that you will really have a say in the way our country is going to be governed for the next 6 years? The vote of the overseas Filipino, whether they're in the US or in other part of the world, is as important as the vote of any Filipino back home. Pareho lang yan. Ang bilang isa lang. So whether you're abroad or in the Philippines, it is important for you to vote, to exercise your right of suffrage, because that is the mechanism given to you by our Constitution by which you can directly participate in the way our country is going to be governed. Please exercise your right of suffrage. Do not pass up on the opportunity. This is your chance to really express your opinion, what you think and who you think should lead our country for the next 6 years. Engage with your fellow Filipinos by discussing issues, not so much the personalities. Ordinary minds talk about people, di ba? Brilliant minds talk about issues.
The prevailing message from the Philippine Consulate General Los Angeles is that no matter where in the world a registered voter is, each vote carries the same weight, which in turn guarantees that every voter's voice can be heard. Eva Pasayaje, Eagle News, Los Angeles.
Back to Canada, Toronto proclaims February as Black History Month. Here is Joshua Santillan for the news.
Discrimination. On February 1st, Toronto Mayor John Tory proclaimed February as Black History Month in the city, in recognition of the history and contributions of Black Canadians. Toronto was the first municipality in Canada to recognize February as Black History Month in 1979. But the history and legacy of Black people in Canada began well beyond those years, where the earliest Black residents were enslaved from 1600s until 1834, when slavery was abolished. Even after the abolishment of slavery and the history of the Underground Railroad, Black people were not treated as equals within the country. To this day, Black Canadians continually face discrimination and racism. Black History Month provides an opportunity for Canadians to learn about the past and present contributions that Black Canadians have made in all aspects of Canada's culture, healthcare, history, and economy. In Toronto, the city is holding several events to celebrate throughout the month, but most importantly, Torontonians are encouraged to confront anti-Black racism that still exists today. This year, the theme for Black History Month is February and Forever, celebrating Black history today and every day. And as stated, even beyond the month of February, Canadians are encouraged to learn more about the heritage and legacy of Black Canadians, to aid in eliminating the barriers of racism that they face, and to promote and recognize the accomplishments and contributions Black Canadians have made throughout history. Joshua Santayana, Eagle News, Toronto.
Ensuring the continued reopening of the economy will benefit domestic inflation rate, which further slowed down to 3% in January this year. An official of National Economic and Development Authority said on Friday, NEDA Undersecretary Rosemaria De Leon said the sustained deceleration of domestic rate of price increases in January from months ago 3.2% is among the positive economic developments in the domestic economy to date. Take a look.
Slower ang ating inflation nitong January, 3%. Going forward, ang pinaka kumbaga robust na move talaga natin is to revive the economy. Kasi kapag marami ang magpo-produce, magkakaroon tayo ng maraming supply, ito ang talaga magpapastable ng ating mga presyo. Now, nakita rin namin sa mga detalye nitong ng price statistics na to, ang malaking malaking nagdulot sa inflation is actually the meat inflation. No? Kasama na rin dito yung fish inflation. And for this reason, magre-recommenda kami actually na i-extend yung validity ng Executive Orders 133 and then 134. Itong Executive Order na itinataas yung minimum access volume para makapag-import pa tayo ng pork, and then ibababa yung taripa. But at the same time, we're also working with Congress para ipasa yung livestock development competitiveness bill, no? Ito kasi parang mga very aggressive measures para i-address yung ma-improve yung competitiveness ng ating livestock sector, kasama na rin yung competitiveness ng corn industry. Kasi yung corn, ito yung nagiging feeds ng livestock natin, ng poultry natin, even fisheries.
To the U.S., Nevada will receive $225 million in bridge funding from President Biden's bipartisan infrastructure law. Anna Cui from our Las Vegas bureau has this report.
The U.S. Department of Transportation launched the Bridge Formula program mid-January, made possible by President Biden's bipartisan infrastructure law. In a tweet, Nevada Governor Sisolak highlights it will send $2.7 billion to the Silver State, part of which will be used to repair and rebuild roads and bridges across the state. According to the U.S. Department of Transportation, the Bridge Formula program is a historic bridge replacement, rehabilitation, preservation, protection, and construction program to be administered by the Federal Highway Administration. The initiative is expected to help repair approximately 15,000 highway bridges nationwide. In Nevada, 28 bridges are reported to be in poor condition based on the 2020 Bridge Inventory Report, according to U.S. Department of Transportation. Of the $2.7 billion to be granted to Nevada from the bipartisan infrastructure law, $225 million is allocated to repair bridges over 5 years, $45 million on year one. Speaking of bridges in poor condition, the under-construction bridge here at US 95 and Eastern Avenue in Las Vegas had a partial collapse 2 weeks ago. It happened just ahead of a scheduled demolition work and was caused by a fallen box girder. The Eastern Avenue Bridge is part of the Interstate 515 Bridge Replacements Project, which also includes the Desert Inn Bridge. Funding for these bridge replacements is a result of an award from the Federal Highway Administration Bridge Grant in 2019. The goal is to replace the structurally deficient bridge superstructures and is set to be completed by December 2022. And with the additional funding from this Bridge Formula program, Nevada Governor Sisolak tweeted, the Nevada Department of Transportation is ready to put these funds to work. Anna Cui, Eagle News, Las Vegas.
Good news for the patrons of the Pantages Theater in Los Angeles. As Eagle News correspondent Ellie Austria reports, the curtain will go up again for the hit musical Hamilton. Take a look.
This show has been troubled by COVID-19 for nearly 2 years now. Originally, Hamilton was to open in March of 2020, but the first wave of the pandemic put a stop to that. Producers tried again in August of 2021. This time, performances lasted until the last week of December. But a surge of cases caused by the Omicron variant drove the actors off the stage as several cast members tested positive for the infection. Now that case numbers have dropped in Los Angeles County, Pantages will try again. Pantages has scheduled performances beginning February 9th. The limited run will end March 20th when the curtain comes down for the final time. Eli Austria, Eagle News, Los Angeles.
Thank you, Eli. Meanwhile, the National Cultural Commission of Papua New Guinea, recognized as the most active government agency, has launched its latest calendar of events. At the scene is Echo Hortaleza Quinola. Echo.
I am here at the APEC building, Port Moresby, to witness the official launching of the National Cultural Events Calendar 2022 and the Annual Operational Plan 2022. Recognized as the most active government agency, the National Cultural Commission of Papua New Guinea launches two significant events at the APEC House, Port Moresby: the 2022 National Cultural Events Calendar and the 2022 Annual Operational Plan. Minister of Tourism, Arts and Culture, Honorable E.C. Henry Leonard, says the National Cultural Commission flourished even in the height of pandemic.
Across the country promoting our festivals, whether it be Sipik, whether it be West Nipperton, Manus, Maroon Bay, Central, or anywhere else in this country. Culture must be promoted in terms of festivals.
He mentions what he describes as strategic documents of solid planning, organized visions, and achievable objectives.
We are a country blessed with so many cultures. We have a lot to offer using our culture to develop tourism in this country. We therefore must continue growth in this industry by promoting our arts and cultures through performances and exhibition. By doing so, we will contribute towards fulfilling the government's plans captured in the Papua New Guinea Vision 2050 and the medium-term development plans. To provide a timeline of events in 2022, the Commission once again has developed the contemporary cultural events calendar and preparation for their respective events.
Director of National Cultural Commission Stephen Kilanda says the launch signifies the agency's important role of combining cultural heritage that shapes the traditional and contemporary societies as they embrace the year 2022.
We have launched almost 77 cultural shows and festivals around the country. We have started launching and developing those festivals at rural settings, at community level, at village level. So it's very important for a country that we can't wait. Otherwise our culture might die out. So we can't wait. We have to continue on. So it's a very important tool to assess the performance of our five-year corporate plan.
Reporting from Port Moresby, Papua New Guinea, this is Echo Hortaleza Quinola, Eagle News. We live in interesting times.
As always, I'll end the day on a thoughtful note. Our ability to look back and smile at our past is proof that God's plan is to keep us moving forward. This has been Eagle News International. I'm Alma Angeles. Stay alert and stay informed because we live in interesting times. Good night.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood.